Hi, friends. Knights versus Vikings. Who wins? Well, that's a ridiculous question as hockey and football skills are hardly comparable. Like, how would that even work? It's just plain silly. Oh, wait, this is 40K. We don't know sports. Sorry, fellas. But Knights versus Vikings is a long debated and fascinating question to many. So, why not apply it to the ever awesome setting of Warhammer 40,000? Plus, we get the epic trope of faction civil wars. So, let's get right into the months of shame. The Months of Shame is one of the most well known Imperial conflicts and was a cool little clash between the ever awesome Super Chads, the Space Wolves, and the dumb silly heads, the Grey Knights, as well as their scumbag inquisitorial handlers. Yep, too late, Grey Knight fans. I depicted the dudes I like as cool Chads and the ones I don't as silly fools. Yup, I'm a guard simp, I'm a Space Wolf simp, Grey Knight bad. But anyways, coming off the heels of the apocalyptic First War of Armageddon, the people of Armageddon were celebrating their triumph over the chaotic hordes and were beginning to rebuild their planet. However, the Inquisition decided in a vote to metaphorically poop on the party and condemn the population of Armageddon as well as the guardsmen who fought in the war to extremely harsh containment protocols due to chaos exposure. The Inquisition, led by Lord Inquisitor Cisneros, told the civilians that they would be relocated to temporary camps while the cities were cleansed of corruption. But, boom! Surprise slave labor camps and secret sterilization. How fun! Furthermore, the Grey Knights were ordered to destroy any Imperial Guard transport ship that was leaving the planet. Boom! Surprise betrayal. How fun for a second time. But luckily, the ultra mega Chad Logan Grimnar was wary of the Inquisition's conduct and remained in Armageddon void space for a little bit longer to monitor them. And upon seeing them kill the Imperials that fought so valiantly to protect the world, he stepped in with the wolves to protect the ships and escort some off planet. While the Inquisition's wariness regarding the people exposed to chaos was not wholly without merit and reason, Demon Primarch Angron did make a little appearance after all. The Space Wolves still believed them to be overstepping. You see, during the war for Armageddon, the Space Wolves, being the cool dudes they are, made a direct effort to minimize chaos exposure to civilians and guardsmen. In the war, the wolves would risk greater casualties to themselves in order to fight with fewer guard reinforcements and to protect whole hives from ever being exposed to chaos in the first place. So, the Inquisition was purging a lot of people who didn't even witness chaos at all. Plus, them being worried about the news of a demon Primarch shaking the Imperium, since now people know that some Primarchs turned traitor is honestly pretty damn stupid. Like, what kind of normal human is gonna actually recognize Angron as a fallen Primarch, let alone even know who Angron is? Plus, you can't tell me that the average Imperial can tell the difference between this and a greater demon. Like, yeah, Angron can corrupt harder than normal demons, but worrying about word getting out of the Primarchs is a bit dumb. And yeah, I know they're pretty much just stacking reasons to justify their actions, but I don't know, that one thing has just always struck me as dumb. But anyways, in addition to that, the Space Wolves also greatly valued those with a warrior spirit and skill. So, to see the guardsmen who bravely and skillfully fought alongside them unceremoniously killed by the Inquisition also just really pissed them off. So, as ships left Armageddon, Kisnaros ordered the Grey Knights to destroy any guard ship leaving the planet and to exterminate any space station or worlds that the ships docked at. And while this was happening, Space Wolves continued to try and defend guardsmen and other targets of the Inquisition. Notably, they would never open fire against the Inquisitorial vessels, even when the Inquisition would just straight up shoot them. They did this so that the Inquisition wouldn't have solid reason to declare them renegade. Typical Space Wolf W. And this Cold War went on for months. Hence the months and the months of shame. And as it wore on, the Inquisition began to feel that Kisnaros' efforts were not worthwhile, and Kisnaros himself was worried about the Space Wolves' growing ire. So he organized a parley with Grimnar. But the conniving Inquisition and the bastard Grey Knights, of course, had secret plans. And the Grey Knights' Grand Master Joros had convinced Kisnaros that he should threaten the Space Wolves into submission and capture Grimnar as a show of power and authority in order to end the conflict swiftly. He literally said that they need to be alpha males and assert their dominance. Typical Grey Knight L. Even Hyperion, one of the few cool Grey Knights, remarked that the Space Wolves are too base to care about silly shit like that and are the true alphas. But Kisnaros is no Hyperion, and he fired upon the Space Wolves after lying about a peaceful negotiation, destroying some Space Wolf ships and crippling Grimnar's flagship. In response, Grimnar agreed to teleport onto the Grey Knight ship to meet the Lord Inquisitor and Joros face to face. On the ship, Grimnar and his elite wolf guard condemned the Inquisition and the Grey Knight's cowardly tactics and their bold-faced deception. He called for the coward who ordered the attack to step forth, and the instant that Joros admitted that it was his idea, Grimnar cut him down with his badass power axe. The Wolf Guard and Lord Wolf then killed the Grey Knight Justicars, who tried to retaliate and scared the shit out of Kisnaros, who promptly let them leave. After this encounter, furious and disgusted by the underhanded and dishonorable conduct of the Inquisition and Grey Knights, Grimnar and the Wolves destroyed any Inquisition and Grey Knight ship they came across on sight, uncaring and unafraid of the consequences, since at this point the Inquisition and their goons proved that they wouldn't be honorable anyways. And as the conflict escalated, the Greater Inquisition began to disapprove of Kisnaros' actions and were unsure about the repercussions of coming into conflict with the Space Wolves due to their legendary reputation and first founding status. Kisnaros was scrambling to find a way out of the conflict that would both avoid the wrath of the Space Wolves and save face for the Inquisition. On one hand, he had to show consequences for defying him and the Inquisition, and on the other, escalating the conflict with the Space Wolves could potentially lead to a civil war, one that may have been even worse than something like the Bad Ab War, since the Wolves would likely be able to garner a lot of support thanks to their status alone. So, the Lord Inquisitor called upon the Red Hunters chapter and Grey Knights to join him in occupying Fenrisian void space, and there he would set up another negotiation, this time with Hyperion and canonical hot babe Inquisitor Jarl's daughter. He brought these two funky characters since the Space Wolves respected Hyperion for his honorable conduct on Armageddon and the fact that he played a pivotal role in banishing Angron. And if you couldn't tell from her name, Jarl's daughter was a Fenrisian native and had some rapport with the Space Wolves. Having the two respectable figures would theoretically prevent another axing and would hopefully demonstrate some good faith. Once arriving on Fenris, they encountered only one damaged ship in orbit defending the world, and they met the Wolves at a Fenrisian spaceport. However, instead of Grimnar, Cassandros and his friends were greeted by the Ultra Mega Chad Bjorn the Fell-Handed. Jarl's daughter immediately recognized the legend and burst into tears at his presence. Hyperion recognized him a little bit later, and then had to tell Kisnaros who he was because, well, Kisnaros is a bit of a dum-dum head sometimes. And with that, the Lord Inquisitor shat his pants again as Bjorn confirmed that he was in the game Warhammer 30k and had fought alongside and also pissed alongside the Emperor himself. That pissing being very important, of course. Anyways, though, negotiations began and Kisnaros demanded that the Space Wolves end their aggressions and do a penitent crusade to repent for their defiance. Otherwise, the Inquisition would exterminatus their homeworld of Fenris, and to that, Bjorn said, "Nuh-uh," and continued to say, "Nuh-uh," until it became clear that the Space Wolves would not submit to the Inquisition. And this was all a trap. Bjorn was simply delaying until Grimnar could ambush the Inquisitorial forces with his hidden fleet and eventually engage them in a void battle in response to Kisnaros threatening to exterminatus the planet. Kisnaros frantically teleported back to his ship to lead his fleet, and after both sides took heavy losses, the Space Wolves finally took down Kisnaros' flagship's void shields, and Logan Grimnar teleported aboard with a large force of Terminators and Inquisitor Jarl's daughter. Logan and the boys cut through stormtroopers and Grey Knights until they got to Kisnaros, and Grimnar sprinted at the Lord Inquisitor and promptly killed the hell out of him. And before the wolves could kill Hyperion and the other crewmates, Bjorn teleported aboard and called for Logan to stop fighting. He commanded Jarl's daughter, who is now the highest ranked Inquisitor, to tell the Inquisition to never return to Fenris and to end this foolish conflict. Otherwise, the wolves would beat him up a second time. And he also told Hyperion to tell the wolves of the Grey Knight's secrets before he would be released. And with that, the months of shame were over. However, Grimnar would forever hold a grudge against the Inquisition for their dishonor and for ravaging their world. Additionally, both sides took heavy losses, which were especially devastating after the losses taken on Armageddon. And overall, I think this is a very cool conflict, as I always like to see infighting within the Imperium, since it demonstrates the dysfunction of their government, and Civil War stories are always fun. Plus, I also just like stories of the Imperium being overtly evil bastards, since that part tends to fly over some people's heads. Also, I'm obviously highly biased, as the Space Wolves are my favorite chapter and the Grey Knights are my least favorite. But in my opinion, the Grey Knights did act very dishonorably and spineless throughout this whole conflict. And even though they were conflicted with taking Cassandros' orders, they still did it and were sneaky bastards on multiple occasions. I also kinda hate when Grey Knight Glazers say it's impossible that the Space Wolves could be Grey Knights and that there are Mary Sues in the story. Both sides took heavy losses, so they aren't really Mary Sues, and at the end of the day, Grey Knights are still Space Marines. Thanks to the usual bad and inconsistent Grey Knight writing, a lot of people think that they're closer to Custody level than Space Marine level, but in reality, they're just psychic Space Marines. Certainly powerful, don't get me wrong, but against one of the most powerful anti-psyker chapters who also specialize in Marine on Marine combat, they aren't gonna have a stroll in the park. But, of course, I encourage you to read from the source and form your own opinions. I'm just one dude at the end of the day, and it's just my opinion. Basically, all the Months of Shame lores in the Emperor's Gift novel, so it's not very hard to find. But yeah, let me know what you thought about the Months of Shame, and who do you side with in this little Imperial kerfuffle? Also, Grey Knight fans, feel free to comment how the Space Wolves are bastard man and why you hate. It's only fair after I voiced my hatred for your boys. Anyways though, thank you for watching, and big thanks to the patrons who support the channel. You're all very epic. And I would also like to extend a personal thanks to Mal and ET for going extra crazy style with their support. They're some of the best, if not the best, crackheads around, so thank you very much. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your Knight vs. Viking space battles. Thanks. Also, by the way, sorry if my voice sounds tired in this one. It's mostly like that because, well, because I'm tired.